Hello and welcome to another weekly update. I hope you're doing well. I hope you had a good week and a good weekend. I hope you either got lots done or had a nice relaxing break, whatever it is you like to do at the weekend. Anyway, lots of things to talk about this week, and we've also got some interesting new things on the roadmap and a conference to talk about. So let's start off with new things, and the first I want to talk about is the Microsoft Graph Toolkit version 3. There's a release candidate out. It's been in preview for a while, but now V3 is coming soon. So the release candidate means that it's going to be GA fairly soon. And so if you're not familiar with what the Graph Toolkit is, then it's a useful set of components and tools and best practices for building applications that work with Microsoft Graph. So if you've got an application and you want to build some Graph functionality into it, whether that's just showing a contact card or whether it's pulling data from Graph, showing calendars, whatever else it is, really worth looking at the Graph Toolkit just to speed up that process, because they might well have a control or a component in the toolkit already that you want to use, meaning that you don't have to do it yourself, which is perfect, right? But also, even if you end up having to write your own thing, you can still use a lot of their design ideas, and a lot of their components, a lot of their auth providers. They're all reusable, they're framework agnostic, they're really nice. So, worth taking a look at. And this has been going for a couple of years now, as you can tell. So V3, and it's a really solid thing. It's really good to see that it's still being invested in. This new version brings a couple of new things, a big style update. I think their intent with the toolkit is to make your application feel like it's part of Microsoft Graph. So if that's what you're trying to do with your application, really make it feel to users like they're just using Graph or Microsoft products or Microsoft 365 products, really make it feel like the rest of Microsoft 365, that experience, then the toolkit is really good for that. There's some new components. This is an interesting one because it's community contributed by Anoop, which is really nice to see. And then they've got this kind of template application, I guess. There's some components in here, new components, and then they've got this application to create like a search-driven application. And you probably saw some of this at Build, if you've seen the Build sessions. It's come out of that, but the components to build all of that stuff are in the toolkit, and you can have access to them. So, this is really cool. It's all, you can get it via NPN. You can go and download it. They want your feedback. They want you to try it. They want to know what works and what doesn't, because they're still working on it. They're still building it. It's still like an actively evolving product. So really good. Definitely jump on that if you do anything accessing Microsoft Graph and with applications, and you want to kind of make them look really nice and look like they're part of the rest of Microsoft 365. Okay, so that's the first thing I want to tell you about. The second thing I want to tell you about is that Azure Communication Services Virtual Rooms is now GA. So what is Azure Communication Services Virtual Rooms? We've talked a lot about Azure Communication Services and what that is. And you could go to Azure Communication Services today and create a group call, create a meeting event. You know, a group call is a meeting. Invite people into it. And that all works. And what Azure Communication Services has given you is just a space, a meeting space to bring, if you spin up or you instantiate or you get 5 or 6 people together, all with Azure Communication Services tokens, and then you give them all the same group ID, they're all going to end up in the same group space. And that was kind of the first iteration of things. And for a lot of people, that's perfect. And it's very simple. It's not prescriptive at all about what you're going to use that meeting for. And that's the right solution for lots of people. However, this next iteration really meets different user needs and is more around kind of putting like a box around that meeting and saying, okay, I understand technically that is a meeting space, but now let's add some capabilities on around who can join it, when they're allowed to join it, how long they're allowed to join it, what they can do when they get there, and just layer on some kind of additional parameters. And that's what virtual rooms are in Azure Communication Services. So underneath all of that, it's all the same technology. It's all the same kind of structure, the same backbone. It's all of that stuff. Virtual Rooms just layers on a couple more kind of rules and guidelines around what that meeting can be used for and by who and when and how. And so that whole thing. It's been around for a little while in preview. There's a big blog post now about it being GA. So you can go and kind of read that and read through how it works. As a developer, you have to go and create a room. You have to configure it, these are all just API calls, but you just kind of say, when it's going to be available, who can access it, who's going to be guests, who's going to be presenters, all that sort of thing. And then that kind of sets it up. And then for the join experience, it's kind of just the same as it ever was, just joining a group, joining a meeting space. So it's all good there. And it's nice. There's a whole bunch they've listed out, which is really nice, I think, actually, all the different, the kind of capabilities that the SDK has as well. So you can kind of see, just by scanning down there, you kind of get a feel for how it works, which is nice. So that's all GA now. So if you've been waiting for that to come out, so you can build things in production on it, now's your time. It is now out in GA, which is very nice. Okay, there's a couple of new things I want to show you. These aren't blog posts yet. They may never be blog posts by me because I'm not quite sure what I'd add other than just kind of talking about them on here. But I found them in the Microsoft 365 roadmap and I thought they were interesting, so I thought I would share them. The first one, a Graph API call for Microsoft Teams meeting recordings. So this has been asked a lot. I know it's been asked a lot because people have asked me about it a lot. So this is going to be an API to let developers access Teams meeting recordings once the meeting has completed. They're going to be available in MP4 audio and video format. So it sounds like if you can get hold of the coordinates of the meeting, once the meeting's finished and the recording is available, you will be able to call Graph and get and download and have access to the MP4 recording of that meeting, which is very exciting. So this is it's on the roadmap. I'll put a link to exactly where it is in the roadmap in the notes, but it's on the roadmap. It's in development. It showed up about 2 weeks ago, I suppose, and it says rollout start June 2023, which I don't really know what that means because that's also the time it went into the roadmap. So maybe they are already working on it. There's no links here for any more information. It's still marked as being in development. I don't think you can roll something out whilst it's still in development, but never mind. We're just going to have to wait and see kind of where this goes in terms of timings. I don't think we'll know for a while. But that's exciting. It's going to be very useful. I know it's a oft requested feature, so that's cool. Be interesting to see where that goes. Another one that's interesting that I also found on the roadmap is this one. Microsoft Teams webinar graph APIs. So there are some new kind of APIs that have shown up in the beta endpoint for getting webinar information. And I think that's probably what we're looking at here. These new Teams webinar graph APIs. Looks like they're a set of APIs to deal with webinars in terms of getting access to attendee information, their attendance, their duration, the registration stuff, registration cancellation, just maybe being able to even create webinars, keep them up to date, delete them once they're done. Maybe all of that stuff can be managed via APIs. We don't really have any detail yet. It does say the data can be exported to third-party systems like CRMs, marketing automation tools, line of business and workflow apps, and they're designed to support business-to-business workflows, whatever that means. So again, this one got added a couple of weeks ago. It's got a rollout start date of August 2023, and it's still in development. So we're going to have to wait for this one. The most interesting thing for me that I found on this was the premium in brackets after Teams Webinar Graph API. So I just want to talk about this for a minute. Now, we know already that Teams Webinar stuff is a premium feature you need a Microsoft Teams premium license for, and that completely makes sense. What I'm not sure about is what happens with the Graph APIs. Now, there's some options here. The first is that Microsoft say, well, you can use the APIs anyway, because realistically, if you don't have a premium license, you can't really use these webinar features because you have no access to them in the client, and it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. So that's really not going to work for you. So it doesn't really matter that you have access to them in the API because it doesn't who cares, right? Because what are you going to do there without having any UI as well? No one is going to kind of completely run webinars via APIs. And that's probably true. I mean, there might be one or two that try it, but I feel like probably that's true. So that's kind of like the least effort solution from Microsoft, and also the least friction. The other thing they could do is try or not even try, but do impose like a license restriction on the API call itself. Now, the only way I think that is going to work would be if they restricted it only to user delegated permissions and not application permissions, because how would that even work with an application permission scenario? So user delegated permissions, and then enforced it in Graph at that point, whether or not you had a Teams premium license, which they might do. It's a lot of extra plumbing for them. It's a lot of extra work on checking. So I don't know, but maybe they'll do that. I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see how, and it's going to be really interesting how Graph APIs, which are a low-level developer kind of machine-to-machine tool for working with data, how that butts up against licensing, which is enforced on a per-user basis. I wonder if, it's interesting the way they say, like, these APIs are designed to support business-to-business workflows, and they can be exported to be used in third-party systems. All of that stuff kind of pushes me to think, really, what users are going to want are application-specific permissions. However, in general, Microsoft tend to roll out features with user-specific permissions first, or with both, and then if they haven't already, then they add the app-specific permissions on later. I don't know how this is going to work out. We're going to have to wait and see. It's going to be interesting to see how that works out, and how they kind of tackle that stuff around license enforcement, if they bother at all. Because like I say, it could just be that they don't worry about it because, if they're enforcing the license usage in the UI, then does it really matter that you can work around it in the API? I don't know. Problems for somebody other than me, which is nice. All right, so this week is exciting because it's Commsverse. Commsverse is a big event in the Microsoft Teams calendar, especially if you live and work in the UK, as I do, because it's a UK-based event, and it's all about Microsoft Teams. And this year is kind of special as well because it's also a home for the Viva Explorers for a couple of days. So expect lots of Viva content as well as lots of Microsoft Teams content. It's a good one. There's lots and lots of people there. I'm going to be there. I'm not speaking. I'm there purely to talk and to listen and to meet people and to discuss things and to have fun and maybe even go to some sessions. So we will see how that goes. But yeah, it's a really nice event. I like it. It's really well organized and managed. The food is really good. And they do lots of things right as a conference. So, and also all the organizers are amazing people. So, yes, I'm looking forward to that one. If you are going to Commsverse, please come and say hello. I know I don't know. I'm going to be around both days. And I think if you show up early on the first day, you'll probably see me. So please say hello. Like if you watch this, if you listen to it on the podcast, if you watch it on YouTube, whatever, come and say hello. It'd be great to see you. And let's talk about Microsoft Teams dev stuff or Azure Communication Services or Microsoft 365 or any of the other things. So that would be good. All right. I've gone way over time again. Never mind. Whatever it is you're doing this week, have a great one. And I will talk to you again next time. If I can find the button to end this. Bye.